conversation with Dr. Romel Tikku. He's the Associate Director of Internal Medicine at the Max Hospital, and also someone who's really been fighting the COVID battle for all of us. He's been there since, I think, day one. We've been having a conversation with him, keeping track of also how the cases are progressing in terms of numbers and in terms of the symptoms. But first, with the doctor, if you can give us, I hope there's some as to where we are in terms of cases. Are the cases going up? Are the cases going down? What do you feel?
Well, if you look at the country as a whole, the cases are definitely going down, and we are seeing a declining trend for the last 2 weeks now. In fact, now we are having less than 30,000 cases a day, which was unthinkable some time back. When we peaked, we had about 1 lakh cases a day. And the cases are still limited to 5 states, which is basically Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala, Bengal, and Delhi. In fact, Delhi had a peak, third peak, which they observed some time back. But now the cases are going down in Delhi also. For the last 1 week, there's been a clear-cut decline in the trend. As far as Delhi goes, the numbers. In fact, we've had less than 2,000 cases, I think, in the last 24 hours, which is like big news. And lots of tests being done, more than 70,000 tests a day being done in Delhi, which includes more than 30,000 PCR tests. So that has really helped, and the government has been at it. So Delhi is now seeing some respite, and hopefully in the coming few months, we'll see the numbers going down further.
Why do you think this is happening? I mean, great news again. I never thought I'll begin a COVID conversation with some good news. So that's at least a chance, a break from the past. But why do you think this has happened?
Well, it had to happen at some point. If you consider Delhi, we've had 3 peaks. People have already had it, and we've reached some sort of herd immunity. And even in spurts, it has been going up and down in our country. Ours is a huge country. So there will be times when it goes up, it goes down. Particularly in Delhi, this was also because of the fact that we had winter setting in, a lot of pollution, and the festival season. Even in Maharashtra and Kerala, it happened post the festivals. So a lot of congregations, gatherings happening. I think that led to the spurt. And finally, that's how it works everywhere. Even in Europe, if you see now the cases are going down. Finally, after the lockdown and whatever they had. But in US, it's still 2 lakh cases a day. In fact, they're having a tough time. Even Russia, for that matter, or Brazil, they're also peaking right now. So these 3 countries are still having lots of numbers. If you compare us with them, so we're doing much better. Look at our healthcare system and infrastructure, but we're doing much better. Multiple reasons for that. But then I think India is doing well. And hopefully in the next 2-3 months, if we have 3 or 4 vaccines, whatever vaccines in place, so then we'll finally reach herd immunity where enough people would have had it, and then we'll break the cycle of transmission.
Vaccines is something I really want to focus today's discussion on. You know, we've seen the first shots have been rolled out in terms of the Pfizer vaccine. Where does India stand right now in terms of vaccines? You know, we are still, I think 2 or 3 vaccines have applied for clearance. So which one are you watching closely and have the most hopes for? Last time we spoke, I think you spoke about the Oxford AstraZeneca. Is that still the case?
I would still, go with what I said last time, because these particular vaccines have had trials going on in India. If we look at the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna, which uses the RNA technology, which is an innovative technology, none of the RNA vaccines have been approved so far in the world. So this is
what is RNA for my viewers, you know, because a lot of us...
Basically, it's a genetic vaccine where they use a genetic code which is encapsulated and injected inside, which reaches the cells. The cells produce the spike protein, which kicks off the immunity. And the immune system sort of starts producing antibodies and kicks on the T-cell immunity. That's how it is.
Like inducting a software of the vaccine as opposed to...
RNA, it's a gene. It's a gene. It's encapsulated in. And that's how it is. There are different mechanisms of vaccines. And the Oxford one or the Sputnik 5, that uses the viral vector, where the antigen is carried by the attenuated virus, which is weakened virus. Like in Oxford, they're using the chimp adenovirus. And that kicks off the immunity once it's inside. So the different techniques. As far as your question goes, the Pfizer vaccine, again, logistical hurdles, cost. See, as far as vaccines go, it's the cost, manufacturing, the distribution, dispersal, so many things. And this particular vaccine, because it has to be stored at -70, is a big logistical hurdle for India. Plus the fact that we haven't till now had official tie-ups with them. And they've already manufactured millions of doses for the other rich countries. In fact, even US doesn't have that many. UK has more. And US will also, by the end of June, they'll actually have most of the doses of the Pfizer vaccine, in spite of the fact that it's developed in US. So all the rich countries already, the Canada, UK, European Union, they have already booked more than what they actually need. So India has also booked lots of vaccines, but India is a huge country with 1.3 billion, and you need 2 doses. So Pfizer and Moderna might not be the ideal. Maybe we'll have at some point some doses which might not actually fulfill what we need. But this particular AstraZeneca, the Oxford vaccine, this is cheap. The trials are going on in India. It's the conventional technology. And we'll know the side effects. There'll be more transparency, distribution, dispersal won't be an issue. And AstraZeneca has already manufactured millions of doses. And then our Covaxin, the indigenous vaccine, which is an inactivated vaccine, that also has been largest trial is going on in India. We'll have more data regarding that. It will be cheap, easily available. And these are the advantages of these vaccines. Apart from the Sputnik 5, which is again a viral vector vaccine, that also has trials going on. I don't think we'll be manufacturing it here yet, Dr. Reddy's, but yes, the trials are going on, and at some point we might have. So we might actually have 2 to 3 vaccines in the coming 2-3 months, which is like brilliant. And for a country like India, it's a huge, huge positive, because that's the only way we can break the cycle of transmission. So maybe at some point we'll have some doses of Pfizer, but we should be banking on the AstraZeneca vaccine, our indigenous Covaxin, and the Sputnik 5. And then we have the Zydus also, the trials for which are going on. And there's so many.
mRNA-based.
Yeah. So there's so many trials going on. And hopefully, because they have already applied for emergency use authorization, the Covaxin and AstraZeneca, maybe at the end of the month or in January, they're approved. Though right now they've been asked to submit more data. And after due diligence and going through the data, I'm sure at some point, once the health ministry and the authorities are convinced that it's safe, efficacious, then it will be approved for use. And then we'll give it to the priority population first, and which is about 30 crores, and beginning with the healthcare workers. And by the time the general population gets it, I think it will be another 3-4 months, at least in the second half of the next year, the other population will start getting it. And so it's a long haul, it's a long process, which might take 1.5, 2 years. Because again, you cannot vaccinate each and every individual in India, 1.3 billion people. But any vaccine which is more than 50% efficacious, and if you manage to even inoculate 50 to 60% of the population, it will go a long way in preventing the spread of the disease.
Hopefully then by next December, you and I will have a conversation discussing our holiday plans instead of which vaccine we're going to be taking. Hopefully. But a couple of questions from what you said. One is, of course, yes, the AstraZeneca and the other vaccines, you're putting a bet on them. Is it because of the accessibility factor, or is it also, because the mRNA, I'm told, for instance, if you were given a choice, which vaccine would you take?
Well, the data about all these vaccines, whether it's the mRNA or the Oxford, whatever interim data we have, is very promising. I mean, in Pfizer, they've given it to more than 40,000 people, and none of them had major adverse events or hospitalizations. So I don't mind even taking the Pfizer vaccine, and even the Oxford, whichever one is available. And if the authorities have approved it for use, I wouldn't mind any vaccine for that matter, as long as it's safe, efficacious, we have enough data, and it's been approved. So that shouldn't be a problem. At some point, once the vaccines are approved, then you have to start to see there is an issue, there is an apprehension regarding these vaccines, because something which was done over years, 10 to 15 years, has been done in a few months. But then there's a reason for that. Scientists, researchers are working overtime all over the world for this particular vaccine. And we do not have enough data because it's only been a few months. But over a period of time, once in the real-time world you start giving vaccines, then you know more about them. There's one thing of watching the volunteers in the trials and going through the trial data, and there's another thing of the real-world experience. Once you start giving it, like in Oxford vaccine, once they started giving it in UK, they realized that 2 NHS workers had severe allergic reaction to it, because they had history of allergic reactions in the past. So that's what you learn every day. Daily basis, you learn something or the other, especially with the vaccines. But by and large, because the data seems to be promising and there has been no adverse event regarding these frontline vaccines, I don't think there should be an issue. So we shouldn't be too skeptical or apprehensive about it. Yes, we have to watch, we have to go through the data, but yeah, I don't think we should think too much about it. Just
Is it
take the vaccine.
normal after vaccines to have some after effects? I mean, even a flu vaccine, a flu shot that we take, you do get maybe a temperature or some kind of. So, isn't that something normal, or are we just panicking too much because it's a COVID vaccine?
No, I think that is pretty common with most of the vaccines. Even with the flu vaccine, you do develop body ache, headaches, mild fever. And that's what has been observed with this particular Pfizer vaccine also. Nothing out of the extraordinary. Yes, there have been a few cases of Bell's palsy where you get temporary facial nerve paralysis. 4 volunteers had it post the Pfizer. But these things do happen, and it's not something which happens to every other person. Again, having said that, we need more data, and with time we'll know more about it. But by and large, we don't have to harp on the side effect thing. I mean, we will have enough information on the side effects, but by and large, going through the data, the interim reports, they're supposed to be safe enough. And it's already being given in 4 countries, the Pfizer vaccine. Now it's been approved by US also. And their reports have been published in NEJM. Even the Oxford vaccine reports are published in Lancet. So these journals are carrying the reports, and there will be peer reviews. And once we go through all that process, I'm sure we'll know more about the safety. But as of now, there shouldn't be any major apprehension as such.
One question: have you, I've been reading some reports on this. Even the vaccines, the immunity lasts only a few months. I don't know, how long does the immunity last? Do we have any research or data on that?
Well, nobody knows. Research is still being done because this is a new vaccine, and it's already even the Pfizer Moderna started the vaccine process in July, so we're already a few months down. So we wouldn't know. It's only with time. So probably a few months to a year, God knows. We'll know with time. The flu vaccine lasts for about a year. Maybe with this particular infection, COVID, the natural immunity post-infection, again, we do not know how long it lasts. The early reports say 3 to 6 months. So we would go with that, maybe at least 6 months. But that's a wild guess. We don't know. We need more research, more data. And in the coming few months, we'll know exactly how long the immunity will last.
In terms of, you said the cases have gone down. Is the symptoms are they milder symptoms now, or they are equally, the few cases that are still coming in, are they showing as severe symptoms?
Well, majority of the cases are still mild, but there are moderate to severe cases as well. There are enough cases of patients I see who have actually a pneumonia and need hospitalization. So yes, definitely the mortality is definitely lesser because now we're more experienced in handling COVID. And now we know that steroids work or particular medicine works, and people are also more aware. They're more proactive. They're monitoring their saturations. They're in touch with their doctors, and that has really helped. But yes, we still see a lot of patients, even younger lot, who have pneumonia and have a bad disease, moderate to severe disease, and are needing ICUs as well. So there's no way to predict who will have a bad disease and who will have a mild disease. So you have to keep doing what you're doing, which is basically taking precautions, wearing a mask. And now finally people have realized it and they've started wearing the mask properly, and which has sort of helped. So apart from that, social distancing, hand washing, you have to keep doing it. You can't stop. I think for the next 1 year, even after the vaccine comes in, you might still have to keep doing it for a while. So that's how it is.
After the vaccines, are you still a carrier? You may not get it yourself, but would you still be a carrier? Is that something that we know about?
Well, I don't think so, but we need more data. See, these vaccines, again, we don't know about the transmission. Yeah, they might help you not getting the disease. But are you infected with the virus, but you're not having the disease, but can you transmit it to others? There's not enough data on that also. So we need more data on that, because the best ideal vaccine is that which prevents infection and prevents transmission also. You might not get the disease, but if you're carrying the virus, you might give it to someone else. So these vaccines don't have too much data on that. So with time, we'll know that also. So there are lots of questions which need to be answered, but it's about time. So right now, might not be able to answer those questions.
Before we take a break, one more question regarding the vaccines. Do you feel that people who already had COVID should also get priority in the vaccines, or should they take, be down the line in terms of getting the vaccine?
Well, down the line, they also might need it at some point of time because the antibodies will wane. Whatever research we have till now the data tells us that the antibodies might wane off after a while, maybe 6 months. But they can't be the priority population. The priority population still has to be the healthcare workers and the ones who have vulnerable issues. So they might get it in the second half. But yes, at some point, I think even the ones who had COVID might also need the vaccine. It's not that they are immune for life. Their immunity antibodies might last them for a few months, and maybe 6 months down the line, they'll also need the vaccine.
Question I wanted to answer, not as a doctor, but as maybe an analyst. There is a debate going on in terms of who should get it. Should the elderly be given a priority? Because if they are okay with no comorbidities, they are actually staying at home versus a 50-year-old who has comorbidities, who will go out, who's an economic asset, will go out and earn money, and then, will in that process also may be vulnerable for infection and infecting others. So should cases like that be given a priority? And not just a blanket age difference.
Apart from the healthcare workers who are in daily interaction with patients, I think the elderly is a high risk. See, the mortality is highest in 60 and above. And there's enough data to say that the complications happen majorly to them or with the comorbidities. So they definitely have to be a priority population as far as the vaccine goes. Coming to the second part of the question, less than 50 years with comorbidities, they are also a priority. In fact, I think they're on the list. Less than 50 years with comorbidities. So, see, you can't just give it only to the young people because the majority priority population has to be limited because the younger population in India is too huge. So you might not be able to give priority to all of them. But yes, the ones with comorbidities have to be given because they might carry it back home and giving to. But a lot of elderly people are also working. They're also mobile. It's not that all the elderly 16 above are sitting at home. So, and they have complications and they are at the highest risk of complications. So they should be the priority population. Again, there's one school of thought which says that inoculate the children and the young because children are the ones who give it. But as far as this vaccine goes, children have had minimal problems. Complications hardly happen to them, especially less than 10 years of age. So there's no blanket statement that we can use as far as this particular vaccine or virus is concerned. So I still feel the priority population, apart from the healthcare workers, has to be the elderly and with the comorbidities, and maybe even younger people with comorbidities.
I'm going to take a break and come back and talk to you about the long-term effects of COVID. We've talked about that, but now I'm told that hospitals actually have a care center for the long haulers. So any tips that you would want to give to those people, but after a break. Hello and welcome back to a conversation with Dr. Tikku from the Max Hospital. Doctor, we were talking about the vaccines, but now I would really like to talk to you about the long haulers, the post-COVID patients, what they are experiencing. And I believe you actually have now it's become like something that is accepted, and you have a section dealing with the long haulers, a term also for them. What would you advise them?
Yeah, post-COVID, for the next 2 to 3 months, they actually have symptoms like headache, body ache, brain fogging, inability to concentrate, insomnia, GI problems, loss of appetite, loss of weight, and these issues, sore throat, dry cough, even breathlessness, fatigue. Fatigue, I would say, is the most common symptom. And if they even climb one flight of stairs, they get breathless because the virus has affected all the organs and the systems in the body, especially the lung and the heart. So one has to be very careful. Don't overexert. Don't do any strenuous exercise. Take it easy. Work on your immunity because you're through COVID, but you might catch some other infection. And because we are in the middle of winter and flu and other infections are also common in this season. So you might catch flu or pneumonia or some other community-acquired pneumonia or other infection. So one has to take it easy, work on your immunity, eat well, have a balanced diet, sleep well, do some yoga, meditation, work on your spiritual well-being, increase your immunity, get a regular check done. Even while you had COVID, you do get tests done regularly, but even post-COVID, you might need some sort of lung evaluation, cardiac evaluation. Be in touch with your doctors. They'll guide you. For at least 3 months, just take it easy and be aware of the side effects or the long-term effects of these infections, and be in touch with your doctors.
I remember you told me don't go and hit the gym as soon as you're okay. That's
a lot of people have been asking me that question, but I'm discouraging them. I'm just telling them after a month or so, you can just go for half an hour of walk to begin with, and gradually they can increase the time, duration, and intensity. But you don't just have to get up and start doing that. And the other question, which most of the people ask me, is when can I start having alcohol? It seems to be the priority for most of the people.
Especially in the winters.
Yeah, so take it easy. Alcohol is not going anywhere. So maybe 2 to 4 weeks down the line, you can start having a drink or two. But again, you have to limit it. You can't do what you were doing previously because now your body has taken a hit. Let it recover. And even smoking, it affects your lungs, your heart. And people who are smokers have already had problems, and they're the population which has complications in COVID. So take it easy as far as smoking, alcohol goes. Don't do any strenuous exercise. Eat a balanced diet. Don't eat out too often. Don't think that you had it and now you're safe and you can do whatever you want. So one has to take precautions for some time to come. And when the vaccine comes, even the people who had COVID, as I said earlier, might also need the vaccine. So we're learning something or the other about the vaccine every day. So listen to the experts, follow the advisories, follow the COVID appropriate behavior. That's what I would advise people.
As a doctor, what is your advice or a request to the government in terms of healthcare? We've seen what all is lacking, what all because we never know when the next pandemic is around the corner. We're not even over this one yet. So what was your message? What would you ask the government if you asked as to what is needed?
It took a pandemic for us to realize how important healthcare is. So India has had a very poor history as far as healthcare infrastructure is concerned because we have never given importance to it. And my advice would be to invest in healthcare, whether it's government, whether it's private. We need more hospitals. We need more facilities. We have world-class doctors. Our doctors are in UK, in US, doing wonders there. Or for that matter, see how the doctors in India have handled COVID. They're on par with anyone, world-class. So why can't we have a world-class healthcare system, infrastructure? And that's what we need. And this present government is so proactive. And I'm very hopeful that they will look into it and make sure that we have a world-class healthcare system going forward. There has to be some way of some medical insurance or something for people who can't afford private hospitals. I mean, there are schemes going on. This government has been active regarding that. But what I really think the government should be doing is giving priority to health and healthcare system. That's what our country needs. A huge country like India with poverty and people not even affording healthcare, basic healthcare, you need the government to be very proactive as far as the healthcare system is concerned.
In terms of the patients, are you seeing a lot of, because, during the last 6 months, all the other illnesses, diseases got sidelined and were not given priority. Even people was very scared to come out. Are now those people coming out more? Is there a confidence that has come back in the patients, do you see, to come out and come to hospitals and in other cases?
It's getting better, but people are still apprehensive. They're skeptical. They do call us and say, why don't we do a virtual consult? Because we're scared coming to the hospital. And it's well understood, their apprehension. But we call them to other centers, which are non-COVID centers. And now that the cases have gone down, I think people will get encouraged to come to the hospital. And over a period of time, it has to happen because, I think 30, 40, 50% of population in Delhi has already had COVID. And in the coming few months, we might have a vaccine. It'll reach herd immunity soon. And then at some point, people have to start going back to normal life. And the ones who had other health issues, they've been ignoring them, staying at home. And actually, a lot of them have gotten into trouble because they did not go to the doctor or seek medical opinion. So I think now they should come out. And if they have any major issue, then they should go to the hospital to the particular doctor. If they happen to wear a mask properly, and maintain a distance, wash their hands, I don't think it's that huge a risk. But yes, once you get out of the house, the risk is there. But why don't you take precautions? And maybe the disease which you have will itself give you more trouble than COVID. So you have to see the risk-benefit ratio.
Also for the doctors, having said that, is this the new normal? Do you see, these kind of virtual consults is something to stay? Because that will also, in the sense, increase your reach. You can then consult a patient. And I'm sure you're already doing it outside India as well, outside Delhi as well.
Yeah, it's been a boon, actually. It took us a pandemic to realize that we can do half the work virtually. And it does make sense. Every time you don't have to actually see a doctor in person. So even with COVID, majority of the work is being done on the OPD work outpatient work is being done virtually. So it is a boon. And for a country like ours, it's not possible for people to reach Delhi or Bombay or big cities. They can do it virtually from any nook and corner of the country. They have access to the top specialists of the top hospitals. And even abroad, people, I've actually consulted a lot of people, patients have consulted me from US, from UK, from Japan, from Holland, from Singapore. I can name so many countries. So especially the Indians who have settled there, they have some sort of comfort talking to an Indian doctor. So yes, it has made us realize that this is something which is the future of healthcare, virtual consultations, and it does really help, because at odd hours you can consult and there's no risk of getting infected for both the doctor as well as the patient. And yes, it has gone a long way, and it's the future, I think, in India.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tikku, for talking to us. But before I let you go, one question. How have the last 8 months been? Have you managed to take a day off? Are you finally getting a day off to spend, to do something other than consult and advise patients?
Well, not really, but now I think hopefully in the coming few weeks, I might have some respite. Last Sunday, I did get a few hours off, but yes, with more and more cases going down, this weekend will be the first weekend, hopefully, I think that I'll have some time off. But till now, it's been non-stop.
Wish you all the best, and thank you for all that you've been doing, and thanks for talking to us. Thanks.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.